Here. Tell me, sir, what's your reaction to this?
It's appalling. I mean, put it in perspective for Americans. You're close to 700 Israelis dead. That would be 25,000 Americans dead and 3,000 taken hostage. And there could be Americans taken hostage. I don't know a single soul in the world that should ever support Hamas. Their whole mission is to kill Israelis, death to America, not to do anything peaceful.
But it's not a surprise. I guess there had to be some provocation. I mean, they've gotten away with, as they say, murder for a long time. I mean, as I keep mentioning this charter where they say they want to kill Jews, and where they say that they don't want a peaceful solution, that no peaceful solution. So it's not a big surprise. I guess Israel tried to contain them.
Tried to contain them, but the challenge here is look how sophisticated this was. This could not have taken place if it wasn't for Iran. They acknowledge Iran gave them the okay, but Iran supplies the missiles. 5,000 missiles coming at you. I've been there numerous times. My first trip as speaker was to Israel to speak at their 75th anniversary in their Knesset, their Congress. I have taken every single term all the new freshman Republicans to Congress, even doing it in a bipartisan basis. I've been down to the Iron Dome on the Gaza Strip. It only has 20 batteries to take up, so anytime you're sending more missiles, you're overwhelming it. But to break through and to attack these villages, there's still, I was just speaking with the Speaker of Israel again this morning, Ohana, they still have a couple villages they're trying to win back. I mean, this is devastating what has transpired here.
They talk about Congress, the squad, the number of members of Congress who support the Palestinians. And I mean, no one wants the Palestinians to live in squalor.
No.
I mean, that's not the issue, but it's the terrorism that everyone's upset about. What's the squad say about this?
Well,
when you speak to them.
Well, it's not that often that we have.
No, I guess you probably don't.
But I've watched since they came to Congress, they have tried to change Congress. Israel was always a bipartisan, and Republicans and Democrats would go, and I started working with Steny, and we would go together. Now it became an issue if Democrats actually went, because when the squad got there, they wouldn't go to Israel. They made it like a negative process. Now, even when to denouncing the actions, I would have to go to the floor. Remember the comments that Omar would make against Israel, against myself, for the support of Israel. That was a real challenge, and the Democrats wouldn't stand up to her.
Why wouldn't they stand up to her?
I don't understand that. They should have easily.
I mean, at least on the topic of Israel.
That is why I removed her from Foreign Affairs. She would be getting classified briefings about this, and her opinion is much different than the rest of the world.
What do you think is going to happen, big picture now? This
is going to be a long war. This isn't going to be a 3-day action. Because you cannot allow Hamas to exist. They're killing women and children. They were going after civilians. They were capturing people. They came over in 20 different areas, but it just so happens they didn't realize there was a concert going on and 2,000 people sitting there. But they can no longer exist. Their existence cannot continue because the world will not be safe. And why did they take this action when we were getting the Abraham Accords working? They were afraid Saudi Arabia was going to recognize and join. This is what they do? Taking children, taking grandmothers, and parading them around?
I don't, for the life of me, I mean, the 9/11 intelligence failure in this country, is just, we know the consequences of that. And I've been harping for a long time on the 51 former intel people who came out with that letter.
These are former CIA directors said that.
Yeah, no, I know. They said that the Hunter Biden laptop was a lie, that it was a Russian misinformation. Well, they got that wrong. These are 51 best intel. And I thought, well, at least Mossad. The Israelis have good intel, even though we've had some pretty big blunders. But what happened to, how does this happen?
They have great intel, we have great intel, but you never have it all.
But this wasn't, you and I both been to those tunnels in Israel, and it takes 10 years to dig those tunnels. This operation that started yesterday didn't just start last week. That's had to be years and years of planning.
Yeah, and they're planning based around Iran. So anyone questions whether the money from Iran went there? Yes, it did. The weapons went there as well. Is it directly the $6 billion? No, but they sent the $6 billion on one so they could send their own money down here. But what you found is, as we get brighter and we use more technology, you never can rely on one form of information. I mean, Hamas works like an old mafia, right? Passing notes and others. That's why you always has to be vigilant in going around and getting information. But this is a terrorist organization that's very sophisticated, utilizing Iran. But this is the thing you have to worry about as well. What about the rest of the world? They've created this axis of power, much like the 1930s. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, all countries that want to expand their sphere of influence. Now, the fear should be we should pay attention to what's happening around the world, because the same thing could happen to us. Israel has a secure border. They have 2 walls with sensors in between, roads in between. You've seen them.
I've been to these walls. They're,
we don't have
there
it
are 5 of me.
We don't have it on our border. And for the same point is, think about the number of people who've crossed our border, almost 9 million people. But they've come from 160 different countries. We've got more people on the terrorist watch list. Think how you get on the terrorist watch list. In the month of February this year than we caught in the entire last administration. We had caught 2 people on different days from Yemen on the terrorist watch list, which is tied to Iran, coming into California. We have caught a number of people coming from China. You just look at the number. If you just take 1% of those that come across, that's 9,000 individuals that come from China directly in. This is a real fear of what's happening in Israel, that could go around the world. But what has happened in America? Can there be a cell or 2 sitting inside our country today based upon what this administration has done to our own border?
Well, President Biden has had a rather complicated relationship the last 9 or 10 months with Prime Minister Netanyahu over his judicial reform. Now he's getting more muscular, and at least we're sending, you laugh.
Because I went on my first trip as speaker to Israel. You know what my first question was? Why won't the president invite our prime minister to the White House? That was the first question from this country. That's what the whole Middle East is asking and wondering. It's showing
Why
weakness.
was that so important?
Because they know the bond, the only democracy sitting there. They know the bond between our 2 nations. It keeps the world freer when they know there's not conflict. But to continue to not, he still hasn't brought him to the White House. He just saw him at the UN up in New York.
No, it was a pull aside. It was
and so
pretty, it was
that
weak.
showed weakness. But also, remember what he did to Saudi Arabia. And then where did Saudi Arabia go? They went to China. So China came into the Middle East, bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together, akin to making America weaker.
Even Saudi Arabia, he said he was going to make a pariah out of Saudi Arabia. Then we needed the oil, so he got himself into a little bit of a bind.
But look where oil's at today.
And then there was great hope that there'd be a normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That's everyone who's working
to build on the Abraham Accords.
Right. And now Saudi Arabia has come out in support of the Palestinians, by being supportive of, well, I guess in support of the Palestinians, which is Hamas indirectly.
Which only sets us back, because a couple things happened at the very beginning of this administration. They reversed course. They no longer were putting pressure on Iran. They started to appease Iran. Then the next thing they started to do was to pay for hostages. You know, I was talking to Robert O'Brien, former security advisor to Trump. We didn't pay for hostages. He got a number out of Iran and never paid $1. They got like 58, he was telling me today, from all different countries, of these Americans coming back but never paying for it, so Americans weren't captured more. This administration started paying for American hostages, so what did we watch around the world? More Americans being captured. Same part. The appeasement, moving money. Then what did he do when he went to meet with Putin, why Putin had those 100,000 troops along the border of Ukraine? He lifted the sanctions off Nord Stream 2. It was like a Neville Chamberlain moment. It was weakness, and it allowed them to invade Ukraine as well. He didn't supply weapons early to Ukraine. He thought that would be hard. I remember in 2015, I came back from Ukraine after visiting where Russia had invaded, going to the White House in the Situation Room, talking to then Vice President Joe Biden, advocating to sell javelins to Ukraine so they could stop tanks, so Russia wouldn't invade. All these things we should learn now so it doesn't continue.
But I think the American people aren't necessarily behind this. They'll deviate about funding Ukraine.
It's not.
But I think a lot of it's because of, Americans, I think, are really good people. They're strong. They want, good things to happen around the world. But we send money and then we never find out what happened. And after the war, we find out that it was squandered and stolen and we're ripped off.
That's why you don't send money. If you sold weapons to defend themselves, you would never have this problem. I mean, think for one moment what has transpired in Israel today is going to be a long battle. Are we going to stand with Israel and be forceful for the rest of the nation not to start telling Israel to stop?
Does that mean send money, send weapons? What does it mean to stand with Israel?
Well, first of all, Congress should get back in session. We're now sending a strike team, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, into the Mediterranean. We supply about $2 billion worth of ammunition. You should make sure the ammunition's able to be supplied. If the only democracy in the Middle East, if Israel collapses, do you know what the rest of the world will look like? Do you know where freedom would go? So, I mean, the one thing is, Hamas never would have attacked had they thought the world was a safer place. They never would have created this new axis of power if America looked stronger. This is a real deviation
I think this would be a good
past
time.
foreign policy.
I think it'd be a good time for the president to address the nation and tell us the plan, but I'm going to take the last word on that. Nice to see you, Mr. Speaker.
Nice to see you.
Coming up.